How to stop the all or nothing mentality. What happens when you ate salad, veggies, and chicken Monday through Friday? And so you decide to give yourself a little treat and have a scoop or two of ice cream on Saturday. But the ice cream just tastes so good, so you have another scoop and another scoop and another scoop, and you end up finishing the entire tub of ice cream. So then you're like, well, now that I'm at it, might as well have some pizza along with that, and then a brownie and some soda, and just turn this cheat meal into an entire cheat day and an entire cheat weekend. And I'll just start over on Monday fresh, and that just makes more sense. Let me enjoy eating all this junk food now while I still have the chance. Monday, gonna start everything over. It's all gonna be fine. The diet starts again and I'm gonna do great. I'm sorry the lighting is just so all over the place in this video. There are clouds everywhere, and if I try to use my lighting, it's even worse. It makes it even brighter sometimes, so sorry. What is the all or nothing mentality? The all or nothing mentality is rooted in black and white thinking, and it's kind of this idea that something is either all good or all bad, and there's like no middle ground. When it comes to the all or nothing mentality in the nutritional aspect, it's kind of thinking that food is either like 100% good, and like your diet is like 100% good, like 100% perfect, you have to do that. And if you kind of stray from that just a little bit, then you might as well go to 100% bad, which is eating like a bunch of junk food and not caring about your relationship with food whatsoever. Obviously, this perspective really fails to account for the nuances and complexity of nutrition, and it can just make things easier at first because it kind of like simplifies the decision making. It's like either you're doing everything perfectly or everything like totally bad, and that way you don't have to kind of be in the messy middle, which is what nutrition actually is all about. Finding your balance and your middle ground, something that works for you and your individual needs. When it comes to the all or nothing mentality, people who are really like deep in it will just like throw out any logical, rational thinking out the window. Like obviously, if you already ate like a bag of chips, it's not better for you to also eat pizza, ice cream, and cookies on top of that, but you will be able to convince yourself that it is using like a bunch of different like arguments that I will explain further on in this video. So how can you get out of the all or nothing mentality? Recognizing the negative cycle. The first step towards change is actually recognizing that you participate in this all or nothing cycle, and that is toxic for you. You need to understand that this mindset can lead to unrealistic expectations when it comes to food, and then guilt, shame, and just like toxic binge eating cycle, like binge and restrict cycle. And it's also super important, once you've recognized that you're doing it, that you try to understand the reasons why you're doing it. And I think that this is so important that the way that this video is going to be structured today is I'm going to give you the 4 main reasons why you may be participating in all or nothing thinking, all or nothing mentality, and then I'm going to give you ways to get out of that based on of these reasons. Just a little reminder that you can find all of the services I offer on my website, and that's going to be the first link in the description. You can check out things that are paid, like my nutrition coaching sessions or my courses, but there's also a ton of free material, from webinars to ebooks to checklists to challenges, so make sure to check that out. The first reason why people may be victims of the all or nothing mentality is because of their desire for control. The all or nothing mentality can provide individuals with a sense of control in a very unpredictable world. In the face of like uncertainties and like unknown stressors and all of that, having very rigid food rules can actually be comforting. And by following these very strict guidelines and food rules, individuals will feel that they are in control of their body, and that's very reassuring to them. Problem is that it may happen that you lose that control, because obviously you're not meant to be eating in a very, very strict, rigid way. So then when you lose the control in your head, since you're like, well, I already lost the control anyway, might as well go to the entirely opposite option where I'm totally free and have like zero control, and I just like binge on whatever I want. And again, this is like subconscious level. It's not something that people are like consciously telling themselves, but it is mechanisms that I see in place like all the time. And here's what you need to do to get out of that. First thing, you need to embrace flexibility. This is one of the keys to breaking the all or nothing mentality, is you need to provoke moments where you are eating foods that are not within your like super healthy, like diety foods that you really enjoy, that are kind of treats for you, and you need to be having these foods pretty regularly so your body knows that it's okay. You can be flexible with your food options and still be healthy. Obviously, you can still focus on making mostly like nutritious choices, but if you have the opportunity to include like 20% of foods that are like more treats or more like junk foods, then you're signaling to your body that it's okay, and you don't need to start everything over the next day or Monday or like the next month or whatever, because it's actually okay to have this balance between healthy eating and also occasional treats and eating foods that aren't as healthy. If something happens and there's a change of plans and you're not going to be able to eat the exact thing that you planned, then know that that's okay, and that you can eat whatever is available to you or whatever like makes sense for you to eat. And if you're kind of like building up your body to understand that that's okay by having these moments where you're a little bit more flexible, then when the control is kind of like taken from you, you'll be able to actually deal with it in a way that is much easier, much healthier. You also need to focus on what you can control, because embracing flexibility doesn't mean that you're never gonna control anything. It just means that you can't control every single thing, and that's totally okay. Again, we don't want to fall back into like the nothing mentality where you're like, well, if I can't control anything, might as well just like let everything go. No. And so instead of micromanaging every single aspect of food and having these very rigid rules, you can focus more on controlling the amount of fruit that you eat in a day, or that you're switching from refined grains to whole grains, or that you're not drinking alcohol every day. And we're going to talk about that more in the next issue of the all or nothing mentality, which is perfectionist tendencies. Perfectionism can really drive individuals to the all or nothing mindset because they believe that anything less than perfection is a failure. So the second they do something that isn't exactly 100% perfect, they're going to see it as a failure, and for them it's going to be a failure no matter what. If it's like a tiny failure, like they ate like one chip too many, or if it's a huge failure, like they have an entire cheat weekend, it's the same thing to them. Perfectionists will often set very unrealistic expectations for themselves, and when these expectations are not met, they will like swing on the total opposite side and just be like, okay, whatever, I'll just do whatever because I'm bad at this and it doesn't matter anyway. And now here's how you can get out of that. And the first thing you need to do is you need to set goals that are actually realistic. You need to break larger goals into smaller achievable steps, and you need to focus on goals that you can actually control, because if your goal is like losing X amount of pounds in X amount of time, that is not something that you have direct control over, and so that can lead to having like expectations that aren't met and then disappointment and all of that. But if you break this down into goals that are actually controllable by you and like actually attainable, so for instance, you tell yourself, I'm gonna drink like 8 glasses of water a day, or I'm gonna exercise 3 times a week, or I'm gonna eat like 3 servings of veggies every day. Things like that are actually measurable and specific and under your control. And I have an entire video on how to set your nutrition goals if you're interested, that you can check out here or in the description. Another important thing you need to do is to embrace progress and not perfection. Shift your mindset from only valuing perfection and only being happy when you reach your end goal to actually appreciating every small step that you take to get there. You need to logically and rationally realize that it's much better to do small things every day that actually add up, rather than to have like this one big unrealistic goal that you end up not doing at all because it becomes too overwhelming, too unrealistic, and so you just give up entirely. Another huge reason for the all or nothing mentality that people often overlook is the emotional justification that it provides. Because some people may use the all or nothing mentality as an excuse to indulge in all the foods that they don't let themselves have. Because by adopting this extreme approach, they can justify it to themselves that if they're not eating perfectly, then they have this opportunity to eat all the junk food, all the sweets, all the like whatever food they like, because it's fine since they're gonna start fresh the next day or next Monday or with this new diet plan or whatever. So actually it's kind of a hidden way to be able to like get in all your binges, because the rest of the time you're eating like very clean. And it's kind of like you dissociate from this person. You don't identify with this person who is like doing all this unhealthy binging, because you're the person with very rigid, clean dieting rules. And if you kind of like fall off the wagon, that's not really you. Like that's not really your fault. That's not a version of you that you associate with. So that kind of happens, and while that happens, you kind of let yourself do whatever you want. But actually this rigid eating behavior is the one that really fuels this extreme binging behavior, because when you're eating like this rigidly, it's absolutely not sustainable and not possible to do this for long term in a healthy way. And so there's some part of you inside that knows that it's not gonna last and you're gonna go back to the binging and on and on and on. So to get out of that, first thing, make sure that you are eating healthy, balanced, filling foods that you actually enjoy. So make sure that you're getting plenty of whole grains, plenty of fruit and veggies, plenty of legumes like beans and lentils, healthy sources of protein and fat, and like plenty of nuts and seeds, and like all the things that are healthy but also that you enjoy eating. And make sure that you're eating these things in sufficient quantities, and that you're also letting yourself enjoy treats, enjoy foods that aren't necessarily the healthiest, because you actually like these foods, and this will keep things very satisfying for you, very filling, and you're going to be less likely to want to binge later on. If you want to know more about all of this, check out my video on healthy eating for beginners right here or in the description. You also need to develop emotional awareness and kind of realize what your triggers are for falling into the all or nothing mentality, whether it be like the binge aspect, like the nothing aspect, or what really motivates you to be like, okay, I'm gonna get back into the all mindset and just like go on this like strict dieting plan. And when you're able to kind of identify these triggers, maybe you're gonna find a pattern, and that's going to be easier to then address. And once everything is addressed, what you need to do is build a toolbox of like coping strategies for when you are just like wanting to eat emotionally too much, because the all or nothing mentality is a way for you to justify emotional eating, because you're telling yourself that it's within this very controlled kind of aspect that is again like kind of dissociated from you. So instead of doing that, you need to actually find other ways to cope with any other feelings that you may have, be it like loneliness or boredom or sadness or tiredness, angerness, whatever these emotions that you're feeling that are leading you to have unhealthy behaviors when it comes to food. And it's totally okay if food is still one of your coping mechanisms, that's fine, but it just can't be the only one, and it can't be the one that you default to necessarily. So make sure that you find activities that like emotionally satisfy you and things that you enjoy doing, and like hobbies and things like that, and also things that you can do kind of immediately when you kind of get these triggers. And if you need more help with that, check out the video that I have on dealing with emotional eating right here or in the description. External influences. The media, social norms, as well as general like conversation of people around you can really promote all or nothing mentality, and diet culture has really built up this dichotomy. So on one hand, you have to diet and do like all these extreme things, and then you can lose like huge amounts of weights. On the other hand, you are eating like a bunch of junk food and just like eating like whatever you want, and you are overweight. And it's kind of like this idea that you can't be in the middle, you can't have a little bit of both. But again, this really drives the all or nothing mentality, because you're like, okay, if I can't be in this extreme where I'm just like dieting, if I eat like a little bit too much ice cream, then might as well fall all the way back into this extreme, because you know, it doesn't work to be a little bit over this dieting thing. And how you can get out of that, number one, is you have to be critical. You really need to take the time to question and analyze the message that is fed to you by social media. And if you just take a few minutes to research and to actually look into it with no confirmation bias to tell you that it works because you want it to, you'll realize that all of this is just like terrible advice, unhealthy, dangerous, and just like does not work. You need to seek information from people who are actually trained in nutrition, like nutrition professionals, and not people just trying to sell you stuff, like wellness influencers trying to sell you stuff that does not work. And you also need to be careful of the people you surround yourself with, and make sure that if they are contributing to like this negative diet culture message, that you have conversations with them about that and talk about your point of view and talk about how harmful that is. And if you feel like you can't do that with these people, then try to really like just detach yourself from them when they are talking about these things. Like, don't intervene, like don't react, don't engage in the conversation, just like let them do their own thing, kind of like zone out or like change the subject, whatever. But you do not need to be like fueling these types of messages. And another thing you need to do is you need to cultivate a healthy relationship with food. You need to work on letting go of your own like guilt and judgment when it comes to food, and really understand that there are no good or bad foods, just foods that bring like different benefits and will be helpful in different moments. It's also important to work on tuning into your body's needs, using your own hunger and fullness cues as ways to know how much you should be eating, or like what you should be eating, instead of looking at outside rules and regulations. So learning about mindful and intuitive eating can be very helpful in that department. And remember that food is not just fuel. It is that, but it's also something that should be used for pleasure and culture and connection, like social connection, like so many other things. If this is a message that you actively start spreading and believing, then you won't be affected by surroundings if they are negative, if they are really like fueled by diet culture, and you'll be able to make your own decisions and just like let that not affect you. So hopefully you will have recognized yourself in one of these like behaviors or multiple ones, and you're going to be able to use these strategies to stop the all or nothing mentality. And I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like it, subscribe, and see you on my next one. Bye!